Well, welcome back to part two of When Worlds Collide with our guest Thomas Jane, who is coming to us this week a lot better than he was last week. He still knocked it out of the park, guys. I think last week because,
Great.
yeah, his presentation was still amazing, even with a cold. Which goes to show you, the level of professionalism that he has, that he's still able to work through the flu. That's teamwork, my man. That's impressive. But now we can't call in sick to movies because they'll have seen this interview and they'll say, "Hey, we know you work when you're sick, so nice try,
No,
buddy."
no
Yeah,
getting sick when you're working. That's right.
no, not in Hollywood. At least they put on makeup, make you look good, but you
That's
probably
right.
still. But there is such a thing as a performance. I mean, musicians, we have that too. Like, let's say you got the stomach flu, you'll jump on stage, you'll perform, you're able to
Yeah,
perform. That's not a problem. The minute you step off stage, it comes back. There's like a
right.
weird performance thing that we're able to do, like
Yeah.
mind over matter, I guess. But
The
yeah,
show must go on.
the show must go on. Just harder for Hollywood movies because you guys have to sit around a long time. So, really blown away with part one, and we're looking forward to part two. But I wanted to welcome our co-host today as well, Katie Page, coming at us from Colorado. How you doing?
Doing good. Doing good.
Good.
Happy to be here. Anxious for part two.
It's
On.
gonna it's gonna be a gooder. I see your lights are functioning in the back. No issues there today, so that's good. There's no I want to get lights in the back exactly like her. I think it looks great. And Michael, even you stepped up your
I did it. I got
background. I
lights
need
too.
to do something. I need to paint my
All right.
wall, which drives people crazy, and I totally love it because it drives them crazy. But yeah, Michael, how you doing, my man?
Dude, I'm doing great. It's been a weird day in the news. I don't know when this is going to come out, but audience will have already heard.
It's supposedly Donald Trump got shot at. Yeah, we just saw that. Now we don't know what's break. It just broke out before
Yeah.
we start recordings. We don't know what the outcome of this is, but yeah, at the time of recording this just took place about maybe 30, 40 minutes ago, I think. But
Crazy.
we'll put that aside for today, and we hope for the best. We hope that it
That's
works out.
right. We got more important things to talk about.
Indeed. And I want to say
Yeah.
before we start, for the listeners who are just tuning into this through the audio feed, you're really missing out. And you should check out the video feed version of this because Thomas's presentations are extremely like image rich. And I mean, they were like over 130, I think, slides in the last part of the presentation. I'm sure it's going to be about the same for this one, and they're all good and interesting. It's like visual candy. It's like watching a movie and eating candy while you're doing it, except about your favorite subject. So yeah, definitely tune into the YouTube feed if you have the space in your mind for it.
Yeah, to absorb the lesson, watch the lesson either on Spotify or YouTube. Otherwise, Thomas's voice is great for ASMR as well. So if you want to relax, fall asleep, he's got a great voice for that too, which is great. But the presentation is very colorful. I like that on your slide. It does look like the 1950s, maybe early 60s sort of sci-fi, which I appreciate because I think at the time of our awakening of these things being here, we were afraid of, the same thing as what it is now, that they were here to hostile take over. And I think our artwork in the 50s kind of showed that
Right.
it was always something terrifying about them. But it's proven to be quite
Wow.
different. But without
We're,
further ado, Thomas, I'll let you take the helm, my man.
we're going to get into that a little bit for part two here. So I'll just do a brief overview of what we talked about in part one, and then we'll dive in. This should take a little over an hour. And welcome to part two of When Worlds Collide. So just to begin, human beings have a perceptual problem. There's nothing wrong with the hardware, but the software is not equipped to analyze or internalize information that comes from outside the known boundaries of human experience. This is why it generally takes so long to integrate new concepts like alien visitation, we've been dealing with this for about 80 years now, into the zeitgeist of human society. So think how bizarre alien telepathy must have sounded in the 1950s to the 1990s when most contact cases are recorded. But today, with brainwaves and brain chips and artificial intelligence, telepathy doesn't seem so crazy anymore. Further, with remote viewing and psi phenomena, we talked about a little bit in part one, there appears to be this non-physical information field that we don't understand yet, but has been reported since antiquity that some humans do have access to and appear to utilize this field to extract information in anomalous ways. So work by Dr. Gary Nolan and others looked at brain scans recently, and they've singled out an area of the brain where this anomalous information may be received and processed. It's the center of the basal ganglia, the head of the caudate and the putamen, the caudate and the putamen, which is an enriched patch of neurons involved with intuition and planning. It's often called the brain within the brain. So they found that high-end remote viewers and some experiencers may appear to have denser than average neurons here. So the denser the region, the more information you can intuit per unit time. Now, if this is true, then we may be able to use genetic engineering and other technologies to enhance and utilize this natural function of the brain to access this information field. So in part one, we touched on the possible impact that such technology-assisted consciousness may have on advanced civilizations. We talked about divided societies like ours and collective or united societies that may utilize a technological form of remote viewing and either selective or immersive telepathy. So with this in mind, we can now approach the problem of alien intent, or what visiting aliens might be up to here on planet Earth. So the first question, are these collective and united aliens nasty, or are they nice? Angels or demons? In May of 2024, two teams of astronomers, just a few months ago, from Italy and Sweden, announced that they had used data from 3 major astronomical surveys analyzing millions of stars to identify 60. They narrowed it down to about 60 with excess infrared emissions that could not be explained by natural phenomena. The astronomers say that these could be potential candidates for Dyson spheres or Dyson swarms. So Freeman Dyson, he thought that advanced civilizations could launch millions of satellites, put them in orbit around their star, and beam energy back to their home planet or planets. These candidates that the astronomers identified, which are up to 6,500 light years away, they emit up to 60 times more infrared heat than is expected. Out of these 60, at least 7 of these, they really honed in on, are said to have no known natural explanation. So Robin Hanson, who brought us the concept of the Great Filter, says that these may come from what he calls grabby aliens, aliens who make it their business to colonize as many solar systems as they can. Our question, do some alien civilizations march around the universe taking planets like chess pieces? Is Star Wars a thing? Or are they committed to some kind of outreach program for the consciously impaired? Exopolitics is a young field, but it aims to define relations between our human civilization and other intelligent civilizations out there. Guys like Michael Salla believe that aliens may exist on a spectrum of service to self and service to others modalities. And there's evidence to support either position. Take alien abduction. Research from Free has found that 85% of abductees ultimately came to see their experiences as a positive influence on their lives. The other school, call it the Carla Turner School, invokes the opposite. Alien abduction is terrifying, invasive, hostile, and the net result is fear, pain, and misery. Then there's the Dr. Jacobs School, my personal favorite, which takes a more agnostic view of abduction. But Jacobs' research suggests that aliens are engaged in some kind of hybrid breeding program, possibly to effect a silent invasion and an eventual takeover of the human race. It sounds wonderful. Jacobs reports that these hybrids, he calls them, share the telepathic mind control that aliens can exert over human beings. So this one feature or superpower should not be underestimated. One can't believe these hybrids are being planted among us so that once they have sufficient numbers, they can affect some kind of worldwide takeover. Others think these telepathic hybrids may be able to raise the consciousness of human society in some non-physical way. This reminds me of the Maharishi effect. Experiments showing, and I believe this has been repeated a number of times, that a small number of meditators in a city can reduce crime by non-trivial numbers. So if this is true, then a relatively small number of hybrid aliens may be able to influence the consciousness of humanity to some end. Dr. Jacobs estimates that there are thousands of cells of these alien hybrids living, working, perhaps even loving in every major city in America and maybe the world. So yeah, maybe your girlfriend is an alien. It's a serious question. Are aliens here to help us or hurt us or something else? December 1942. The United States began working on the Manhattan Project. We conducted the first nuclear test explosion in July 1945. We dropped 2 atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. Just 4 years later, Soviet Union conducted its first nuclear test. The UK, France, China, they all followed, and we all started blowing them off like firecrackers. At least 8 countries have conducted 2,056 nuclear tests since then, and we were off to the races, the nuclear arms races, where there is no winner. So this is no ordinary game. This new game was for all the marbles, where one wrong move meant the end of everybody. So something had to be done. Enter John von Neumann, founder of something called game theory and the eponymous von Neumann machines that we discussed earlier. Perhaps the greatest mind of the 20th century, one of the key scientists who helped unlock the secrets of the atom and leading the world into its first apocalyptic crisis of conscious. The most famous problem in game theory is called the prisoner's dilemma, and the YouTube channel Veritasium does a great video on this. So the prisoner's dilemma. This was developed in 1950 by mathematicians working for the US think tank RAND Corporation during the Cold War. And some think it was specifically designed to deal with the question of the atomic bomb. It presents a situation. This theoretical game called the prisoner's dilemma presents a situation where 2 parties, separate, unable to communicate, must each choose between cooperating with each other or defecting. It goes like this. So 2 criminals are arrested for robbing a bank, and both care more about their own personal freedom than the other guy. A clever prosecutor makes the following offer to each one. You can choose to confess or you remain silent. If you confess and your partner remains silent, I'll drop all the charges against you and your accomplice will do serious time. If your partner confesses and you remain silent, they're going to go free. You do the time. If both of you confess, you'll go to jail, but I'll see to it that you both get early parole. And if neither of you decide to confess and you cooperate with each other, then I'll have to settle for token firearms possession. So the dilemma faced by the prisoners is that whatever the other guy does, it's better to confess than to remain silent. But when both confess, it's worse off for everybody than had they cooperated with each other. So the Soviets in the US, they both spent around $10 trillion building a massive nuclear arsenal, enough to destroy the planet many times over. I think in 1986, we had something like 70,000 nuclear weapons. Now, the other option would have been to cooperate with each other and not build any. So by both acting in their own self-interest or defecting, everybody was worse off. And this isn't a one-time game. This is a small world. Both countries aren't going anywhere. So the game changes when we are forced to play multiple rounds. Defect now, and your opponent can use that against you later. So in a game that's ongoing, What's the best strategy? So this was a question of serious debate for years, decades. Enter Robert Axelrod, a political scientist. In 1980, Axelrod held a computer tournament with the world's leading game theorists. He wanted to put the matter to bed. Now that everybody had a computer, we thought maybe we can solve this problem. So to simplify, Axelrod used a point system. We got 2 players. Each player gets 2 choices. You cooperate with each other or you defect. If one of you defects, but the other cooperates, the defector gets 5 points and the other gets nothing or goes to jail. If you both defect, each gets 1 point. If you both cooperate, you each get 3 points. If you didn't follow any of that, no problem. The goal is to get as many points as you can. So each game theorist would face off against the other with their favorite strategy that they developed and against a copy of itself. And may the best man win. So a simple strategy would go something like this. Start out cooperating and only defect after your opponent defects twice in a row. Okay, this we can call a nice or cooperative strategy. Another strategy could be start out cooperating, but when your opponent defects, you defect and you keep on defecting for the rest of the time. Bring the hammer down. This you can call a nasty or defective strategy. Nasty programs were sneaky. They're trying to probe the opponent to take advantage of any weaknesses, and nice programs tended to give the benefit of the doubt. So to cut to the chase, the program that won the tournament came to be called tit for tat. It starts out by cooperating, and then it copied whatever the opponent did in its last move. Cooperation with cooperation, defection with defection. If the opponent goes back to cooperating, so does tit for tat. So if both players cooperated, then each one would get a perfect score. If one player always defected, then tit for tat would mirror that. But because enough strategies were cooperative in the tournament, I think it was 8 out of 14, that tit for tat ended up coming out on top. This was a big surprise for Axelrod. He thought that it would take a complicated program to play a sophisticated chess-like game, but it was the simplest strategy that did the best. It turns out all the best performing strategies were nice. The worst performing nice strategy, named Davis, still outperformed the best nasty strategy by 71 points. So Axelrod learned something. He learned the top quality was being nice. The second most successful quality was being forgiving. And this conclusion that being nice and forgiving was the most successful strategy in game theory came as a shock to the researchers. In the first tournament, they had a set number of rounds, 200 rounds. In the second tournament, Axelrod told the players they're not going to know how many rounds they'd be playing. Why? Because if you know when the last round is, there's no reason for you to be nice. The logical thing to do would be to defect. But if you're not sure when the game ends, you have to keep cooperating, which is, of course, much more like real life. So the contestants had analyzed the results of the first tournament, and they tried to use this information for the second tournament to build better mousetraps. Some contestants submitted strategies that were nice and forgiving, and the second camp anticipated this and tried to design nasty strategies that would take advantage of the nice guys. But once again, being nasty didn't pay off, and tit for tat was the clear winner. Axelrod was able to use these results of this tournament to define 2 more winning qualities. We've got nice, forgiving, and the third successful quality is being retaliatory. If your opponent defects, you retaliate right away. Don't be a pushover. And the last quality is being clear. Strategies that were too complex or opaque, they didn't work out so well. You want clear and simple and consistent rules that your opponent can easily work out. So being nice, forgiving, retaliatory, and clear is the most winning strategy in game theory. It's not turn the other cheek philosophy of Christianity. It's the older and more primal strategy of an eye for an eye, but don't hold a grudge. But that's not the whole story. The strategy that performs best is always dependent on the other strategies it's interacting with. In other words, its environment. What if we ran a nice tit-for-tat simulation where all the other opponents were nasty? Well, you'd go extinct. Tit-for-tat comes in last. In a nasty world, the nastiest strategy wins. But as the other nasty strategies go extinct, the nastiest one has nothing left to prey on and then quickly goes extinct itself. But if you had a nice little cluster of nice opponents, right? And a small group of nice opponents surrounded by a cosmological ocean of nasty opponents, you would want to focus on playing with your nice opponents most of the time. This will start building up a lot of points, and that translates into resources and offspring that will start taking over the nasty population. So Axelrod showed that a little island of cooperation spreads out and will eventually take over. So it turns out the game theory is a pretty good ecological simulation, and I think it works as a simulation for the cosmic ecology. Poorly performing strategies go extinct while successful strategies grow and multiply. Cooperation is not just a strategy that works, it's the only strategy that works over cosmological timescales. So how do we live in a world where looking out for number one as the prime driver and still allow for cooperation to emerge? We're not trying to be good because we're good-hearted or we're altruistic. We are good because that's the most successful strategy for long-term survival. Axelrod's discoveries were applied to everything from evolutionary biology to international conflicts. But there's one thing that he didn't cover. What happens when noise is introduced into the equation? In other words, you have a program, you want to be nice, you know that it's nice to be nice, but you screw up or your actions are misinterpreted as being nasty. So in July 1945, the Allied countries demanded the unconditional surrender of Japan or suffer, quote, prompt and utter destruction. Japanese reporters pressed the prime minister for a reply. Suzuki gave the standard politician's answer, no comment, right? But he had used the Japanese term for silence, which is makusatsu, a word that can also mean ignore with silent contempt. 10 days later, Truman released the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, killing 170,000 people. And this was also part of the original UFO equation. The United States and Russia were both actually very worried that UFOs being tracked on radar would be misinterpreted as ballistic missiles and spark World War III and the end of civilization. The UFOs represented noise in the signal. When noise is introduced into a tit-for-tat program, both opponents suffer from an echo effect of retaliation. So one way around this is to introduce 10% more forgiveness into your program. So after, say, 9 retaliations, you throw your opponent a bone and see if he reacts favorably. This is one long weekend in the late 1980s, after Axelrod had completed his work and had kind of been absorbed by the Politburo. Reagan and Gorbachev had a series of conversations which resulted in both the USSR and the United States slowly reducing their nuclear stockpiles. They went from 70,000 and they kept reducing year after year. I think they got down to about 12. Every year they would review each other's arsenal and confirm that they were disarming, and they continued to do that year after year. But times changed. The Soviet Union collapsed. New people came to power. NATO thought they could expand wherever they pleased, and the lessons were forgotten. And we are where we are today. In the short term, the environment has an influence over the player, who does well and who doesn't. But in the long term, it's the players that shape the environment. So I think over cosmological timescales, we're living in an environment that has been shaped, crafted, and curated by the players that have come before us. So what could this teach us? Alien societies that have survived over cosmological timescales very likely have extremely cooperative strategies. And there are indications that this might be true. We've seen many different species or types of aliens reported to visit us through landing cases and other things, and yet they all share extremely similar technologies. This is consistent with the so-called NICE strategy. One could argue that they have been clear and consistent with their activities around Earth for the last 80 years, maybe not very forthcoming, but fairly predictable. Aliens appear to respect the infrastructure that we have built. They don't get involved in our politics, as far as we know. And so far, they've even respected our right to detonate nuclear bombs all over the planet, including our atmosphere. And there is anecdotal evidence that aliens are retaliatory. June 15th, 1968, Vietnam. Along the demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam, a patrol boat known as PCF-12, commanded by a Lieutenant Pete Snyder, was on a routine night patrol when it was approached by two unidentified lights. Snyder ordered his men to open fire on the lights and then called in a group of Phantom F-4 fighter jets who chased them out to sea, firing their missiles at the strange craft along the way. Later that night, the Hobart, which is an allied ship of the Royal Australian Navy, detected an unidentified aircraft coming in fast. A missile struck the ship, killing one soldier, injuring two others. Two more missiles were fired in quick succession. An investigation revealed that the Hobart had been destroyed by U.S. military missiles. They called it an incident of friendly fire. But another explanation consistent with reports is the alien aircraft had somehow appropriated the missiles that were fired on them earlier by the F-4s. And then they unleashed these same missiles on the Hobart in an alien judo move. Use the force of your enemy against him. Tit for tat. So I've often wondered, would aliens prevent humanity from blowing each other up in a nuclear conflict? It's a good question. And I think the answer might depend on how rare planets like ours are. With 1 in 5 stars carrying an Earth-sized planet, maybe not, doesn't look so good. So I think aliens might let us blow each other up. And I'll tell you why I think that is. Because this is the game that alien civilizations must play with each other all the time, a cosmic mad or mutually assured destruction. And as I said, this ain't no zero-sum game. This is a game where the loser goes home broke, not only broke, but obliterated for all time. So I think we got a very specific reason why aliens might show up at precisely the same time that the world has had to engage in a form of game theory where everybody has to learn the lessons of the game or die trying. I think spacefaring aliens must take measures to protect themselves from potential aggressors, civilizations that are not yet mature enough to be self-sustaining. However, aggression in a self-sustaining advanced society, that's illogical. And this has nothing to do with whether aliens are nice or nasty, and everything to do with species survival. Aggression slows societal advance. Cooperation speeds it along. The longer a society takes to advance, the more that can go wrong with a planet or a biosphere. So we're not ready to play a game theory with aliens. We're still trying to figure out how to do that with each other. But it stands to reason that super civilizations would need to vet younger civilizations and determine who among them is nasty and who is nice. So the question isn't, are aliens good or bad? The question is, what are we? Bob Dean, he said that he knew for a fact that based on, I think he'd seen a report based on a study from 1974, our military had concluded as early as 1949 that planet Earth is and has been the subject of an extensive, thorough, and detailed study by several extraterrestrial civilizations. Several, he said. Studies have indicated that some sort of program or plan was underway and had been ongoing for possibly hundreds or even thousands of years. And that if they were malevolent or hostile, there was absolutely nothing that we could do about it. Paolo Coutinho from part one, he asked, why don't aliens come down en masse to our planet? I think that aliens know that they would be an incredibly destabilizing force. And another reason aliens hide may be because they are busy managing or guiding the trajectory of our civilization. So if a remote viewing is real and can be enhanced with technology, aliens, I would think, could extract information about Earth from the comfort of their own home planet. So what are they doing here? We've heard Richard Dolan's argument. Aliens are here because human technology is accelerating at a pace that puts us on the doorstep of the cosmic ecology that visiting aliens reside in, right? Or if not on their doorstep, then we're standing on the edge of their backyard. Okay, maybe we just have tentative directions scrawled on the back of a napkin in an illegible, drunken hand. Nonetheless, we may be just one scientific revolution away from anti-gravity and interstellar travel. Too close for comfort, aliens might argue. So just as our controllers, those 100 families that are steering the ship of human destiny, they need to think 20 to 50 years ahead to maintain their grip on power. Aliens may be here to manage human society, to put protective stopgaps in place, or perhaps to gently guide our civilization in ways that are beneficial to them and the cosmic ecology they live in. And maybe we're not the only ones. Out there in the visiting aliens' backyard could be an untold number of similar animals, could be performing similar feats of outrageous stupidity. You would not believe what these other idiots get up to. But there's more than one way to skin the cat of potentially murderous, power-hungry, trash planet goons who think they're oh so smart. There are several ways that aliens could do this covertly, but we can break that down into two camps. The end game of an invasive strategy would be elimination, sublimation, domination. Get these cretins off the table. If we like your planet, maybe we could engineer a virus that has a 100% kill rate, designed with a cleavage site that only works on human beings. Everybody's terrified of a virus vaccine these days anyway. And a non-invasive strategy is a bit more delicate. One form of subtle guidance could be telepathically implanting revelations into the minds of certain leaders at crucial times, an alien inception. Or aliens could build bacteria that lives in the microbiome of the human gut. We got more bacteria in our bodies than the cells we're made of. And these bacteria would release serotonin or other hormones into the bloodstream, and they could be dialed up or dialed down. Aliens could lower our testosterone levels, making humans less aggressive. The truth is, testosterone drives men absolutely bonkers. In fact, researchers have found that testosterone levels have been steadily declining in men for a while now. Sexual content in films has been steadily declining since the year 2000. Maybe that's why I don't get asked to do sex scenes anymore. Rising obesity, as well as the sharp decline in cigarette smoking, might help explain these findings, given that testosterone levels are lower among overweight people, and smoking actually increases testosterone levels. Another recent discovery is microplastics in the testes. So this also might have, so we're getting it from all sides. I think I'll take alien interventions. Thank you. Aliens could leave some technology behind for us to find. They could do this in every major country. Even if we didn't have the technical ability to reproduce this technology exactly, it would sure get us thinking about things in new ways. If aliens play a form of game theory, non-invasive strategies make the most sense, at least to me. These would include constant monitoring and continuous data collection. So even with some form of holographic, non-physical communication, this would be a full-time job. It's also, at least from our point of view, incredibly tedious. Might this job be better suited to an army of disposable biosynthetic organisms who are technologically dependent, who don't need any time off, who are created to perform a series of complex but repetitive tasks? So non-invasive management strategies would have to be complex, extremely fluid, and make adjustments in real time. This also means that it would be entirely possible that a non-invasive strategy could flip and turn invasive, right? If they do turn invasive, then certain protocols and structural engineering would need to be in place and ready to go. This would require an enormous amount of investment and time and energy. Advanced alien societies may send self-constructing von Neumann machines to developing planets using indigenous genetics to create a hybrid army of biosynthetic workers to study, monitor, manage, or manipulate emerging societies in order to protect and preserve the cosmic ecology that aliens live in. In a world of free will, it could be entirely up to us what our future may hold. But even non-invasive strategies can have knock-on effects that may be hard to predict. It doesn't take much to disrupt an extremely complex system in unforeseen ways. Let's look at the pill. Before birth control, I'm going to say it, women needed a man to take care of them. It was hard for them to make a living on their own, and a man was not going to take care of a woman who had a baby out of wedlock. This was a completely different world than the world that we live in today. Sex with a woman had to mean something every time. Women had to be very careful and very selective. So the first pill was called Inovid. It was introduced in 1960, but state obscenity laws prevented everybody but married couples from accessing it. State obscenity laws, think of that. Until 1972, when a landmark Supreme Court ruling gave all women access to the pill. And that's how we got the swinging 70s. Disco, porn, boogie nights. The end result was that sex became a cheapened commodity. Today, sex precedes a relationship every time. And the results of birth control, of this pill, was paradoxical. The pill led to more single mothers and more abortions. So this is an example of second and third order knock-on effects of introducing one simple element into an extremely complex system. One little pill changed the world for the better, for the better. But aliens have inserted themselves into this extremely complex system, and their presence here has had knock-on effects, effects that are, at this point, irreversible. What we're dealing with now that previous generations haven't is the second and third order effects of alien visitation. I think one we can call the ceiling of suppression. The technical evolution of our society is being suppressed to conceal, some would say protect us from the fraternity of star-faring races in the universe. It protects our economy from major upheavals in the energy sector. It protects our national identities and our borders. It protects us from seeing ourselves as one race, the human race on one planet among countless inhabited planets. It protects us from reevaluating our political structures, our social structures, and most of all, it protects us from learning too much about the universe that we truly live in. When you think about this, there's been no progress in particle physics in 50 years. There's been no progress in string theory in 40 years. As Eric Weinstein says, that dog doesn't hunt. It's dead in the backyard. And yet the physicists still believe that they're going to take it hiking. The problem is physicists are no longer allowed to look at the original problems, the original physical problems Why is nature left-right asymmetric? Why are there 3 copies of matter rather than only one? Why are there a particular set of symmetries that generate strong, weak electromagnetic forces? Why does space and time disappear at the speed of light? So meanwhile, physicists are spinning their wheels with abstract analytical problems. Why? Why is this so? Weinstein says, quote, "It's almost as if there's a force field trying to get us not to unlock this power." And well, Weinstein's very curious to know why that is. I think we here have a pretty good idea of why that is. The year 1900 to 1945 are considered to be the golden age of physics. The cell phone in your pocket is the most advanced piece of mass-produced machinery that man has ever devised. It uses quantum tunneling to trap electrons into a charge trap to store information. So quantum tunneling was discovered in 1927. We're getting to the point where we can't run the world on 100-year-old physics. We can't continue to run the world on coal and gas. But we're living, in my opinion, under an artificial ceiling of suppression. Our reality is being managed by those who control the suppression. Dane Wigington calls them the controllers. They control our economy, they control our technology, they control our science. They're trying to control our weather, according to Dane, and there's evidence to support that claim, as outlandish as it is. So the problem is that our collective consciousness is outgrowing this ceiling of suppression, forcing these controllers to take more and more drastic measures, and in so doing, they're outing themselves. They can't stay hidden forever, and indeed, they haven't. The only question is, will we wake up in time to stop it? The problem today is what's really going on above that ceiling of suppression, up there in the real world, the physical universe that we barely understand, where 96% of it remains dark, is so fantastic. It boggles the mind. Or maybe we've just been told it's impossible so many times and from so many different angles that we hesitate to believe what's in front of our eyes. Maybe we've been bamboozled. Maybe it's the Carl Sagan thing. It's easy to fool someone. It's incredibly hard to convince someone that they've been fooled. Society has never been closer to the collective realization that aliens, non-human intelligent beings from beyond Earth, are among us, at work on our planet. That indeed the human race is not alone, not only in the universe, but right here in our backyard. And at the very same time, we've never been closer to total societal collapse than this moment in the history of our modernized, electrically fired, fossil-fueled, industrial, digital age. So the next logical question is, why don't these visiting aliens come out of the closet and give us a hand? Everybody needs a leg up now and then. Why not us? I'm talking about an alien general assistance plan. I mean, with hundreds or thousands or an untold number of civilizations out there, why wouldn't some humanitarian civilizations dedicate a certain amount of time and energy toward teaching backwards planets like ours how to dance? Dance like Barishnikov. Last story, the landing case. This is September 1955 in Vienna, Austria. This is from Preston Dennett's YouTube channel, my favorite channel for documenting alien encounters. So this is from a video called 10 Incredible Humanoid Encounters. So the man is Joseph Wanderka. He had joined an anti-fascist political group at the age of 15. A lot of trouble was going on in the country in 1955. So Wanderka found himself something of a wanderer, spending a lot of time cruising around the outskirts of the city on his moped. One day in September, he's driving his moped along a forest path outside the village of Arborstal. It was about 2 p.m. Ahead, he saw a metallic gleam of an object landing in a clearing off the path ahead of him. So he drove up and he found himself in front of a disc-shaped craft, about 35 feet wide, 7 or 8 feet tall, with a 12-foot ramp that led up to an opening about 6 feet across. And the inside, he said, was brightly lit. So Joseph drove his moped right up the ramp and into the craft, where 6 people were waiting for him. He said they were about 5 feet tall. He said they had beautiful, childlike faces. They wore identical dull gray overalls with no buttons, no seams, no insignias. He said they had an unusual collar. The entities had blue eyes, medium-length blonde hair. The light was a pleasant yellow, and as far as he could see, it had no source, as we hear again and again. The interior was surprisingly empty. There were no panels, no buttons, no gears, no chairs, not even chairs or tables. The German Austrian introduced himself, gave his name, where he lived, and one ET responded, he said, in a feminine voice and perfect Austrian German, pronouncing each syllable, quote, rather in the way an Englishman does. It said, "We have come, according to terrestrial standards, from the highest peaks of Cassiopeia." The aliens were interested in Joseph's moped, and they asked him, how does it work? And Joseph tried to explain the basics of a combustion engine. Joseph said, here on Earth, we have great social injustice, with a privileged upper class enslaving the working class. He told them about the horrors of the Nazis, that it just destroyed Europe, and all the political upheaval of the time. The aliens listened patiently, and then they said they no longer have the problems that Joseph was speaking about. They told him that the social system that we have on Earth is, quote, outdated and primitive. In our system of state, there are no more differences. We consider the form of society on Earth to be long obsolete. Does that mean that this form of society did exist at one time on their planet? The aliens told Joseph, quote, "We did not at all come to interfere in terrestrial matters. As a man of Earth, you must engage in such action yourself. You must know that such a revolution of the entire social structure of the Earth can be started, but you have to devote yourself to that." Joseph pleaded vehemently for their help. He's saying that the countries of Earth are being overrun with corrupt politicians whose only goal is power and money. Joseph began to weep. The aliens just looked at him. Joseph got embarrassed and uncomfortable. And then he said, it's time for him to go. So we said, good day. The aliens bowed and he left. He said the floor was so smooth that he was able to spin his moped around as if it were made of ice. And he drove down the ramp and he went home. Joseph reported that he was deeply affected by this encounter, expressing great regret that he'd cut the meeting short, and he hoped that he might meet them again someday. But alas, this was not to be. So free energy, cure for cancer, stable form of government, purpose. As a man of Earth, you must engage in such action yourself. No one can tell us what's valuable, and certainly not what's most valuable. That's up to us. Aliens can give us some clues. I think they do. But anything more than that would create a kind of dependence that could only lead to resentment in the future. We'd always have that nagging question. Could we have done this ourselves? Could we have created a sustainable, healthy, living society on a perfect planet that has everything you'll ever need for everybody? Would we ever have been able to figure that out? And we'd never know. We would never know. Aliens are already influencing us with the reality of their existence. So I'd like to point out, we have not met the civilizations, only their emissaries. We know nothing of their culture, of their political attitudes, their values, their goals. All we have to go on are the emissaries that have engaged certain humans within very specific and narrow aims. Ever been on an alien craft? There's very often nothing there. Like Joseph reported, no food on board, no personal items, no closet space. There's no back room where the alien gray kicks back and gets his drink on. There's no art. There's no elevator music, no Eames chair by the cockpit. Sometimes a little insignia is seen on the breast or the sleeve of a skin-tight militaristic uniform, usually plain, of one color, often gray. I don't think this is because we're dealing with a drawl band of space nihilists. I think, like everything else aliens do, it's purposeful. They are purposefully keeping the cultural transmission as close to zero as they can. If aliens handed us free energy and a book of rules and laws for us to follow, these aliens themselves would never be confident in our future abilities. It's like a doctor. In Japan, they've got an incredibly rigid bar exam for doctors. 2% of students pass that test. So which doctor would you go to? The one that was handed a little cheat sheet, or the one who truly understood the sacred duty of caring, treating, and curing? So while material knowledge from visiting aliens may not be the best thing for our material civilization, we do need a way to begin to come together in the pursuit of love and life and liberty and something else. Visiting aliens, visiting Earth for whatever reasons, and there are probably many, must have for themselves certain guidelines, certain goals. And I'm willing to bet it's not about dollars or ducats or selling spice. I'm willing to bet it's not about how many planets they can conquer, how many resources they can control. Whatever aliens value, it must be intrinsically valuable, not just symbolic like money or hopscotch. You don't have to be talked into it. It's not propaganda. In fact, sooner or later, many or most advanced sustainable civilizations must come to the same conclusion, land on the same shore, so to speak. And where might that be? Robert Freitas is one of my heroes. He is still alive. He's a leading American nanotechnologist. And his unpublished book, Xenology, from 1979, can be found online, and I highly recommend it. So in it, Freitas has formulated a series of metallurgical principles working solely from the basis of what the author had termed thermodynamic ethics or thermoethics. So instead of using the anthropocentric golden rule as a barometer for ethical decisions, Freitas has come upon using life itself. Living things are open systems that draw energy from the environment to build and maintain order and complexity. We call this quality of living negentropic, the opposite of which is entropic. So Freitas states the main thermoethical principle as follows: all living beings should always act so as to minimize the total entropy of the universe, or so as to maximize the total negentropy. According to this principle, living beings should act with the mission of life in the cosmos in mind. Life, with a capital L, the propagation, cultivation, and protection of life itself. The beating heart of the universe, the bass note of existence, the resonant frequency we all share, no matter where we come from. Now, this doesn't mean that our cosmic gardeners have vowed to protect us from ourselves and all outside threats because we are alive, because we all share the sacred breath of life and therefore are worthy of protection at all costs. Quite the opposite. Thermoethical decisions require that one's actions are conceived and executed with the entire cosmos in mind, not just other beings and their local habitats. So Freitas writes, quote, consequently, it may be ethical to perform some act which decreases local order if the net result is an increase in the total order of the universe. Anybody who's kept a garden knows some forms of life must be eradicated so that other forms of life may persist. I'm talking about weeds. I'm talking about parasites driven by self-interest and lusty desires for money and power and sex and money. Under thermoethics, civilization should avoid harming each other unless doing so ultimately increases the overall negentropy or order of the universe. Could this be why aliens are here? As part of their thermoethical duties? The concept of thermoethics might be derived from deep principles that are baked into the universe itself. So neo-Darwinism, or the modern synthesis, holds that evolution is the result of unguided processes over millions of years that shape the evolution of complex living systems. Any purpose attributed to these is anthropomorphizing, right? Or attributing human-like characteristics to non-human things like animals or objects or processes. However, this mode of thought can be reversed, and indeed, some of the folks coming in now are starting to think of this as maybe we've got this backwards. What we think of as human purpose or telos could be derived from an innate organizing principle inherent and fundamental to life itself, from cell networks to biospheres. In other words, humans didn't invent purpose. Humans are just another embodiment of a universal telos that makes up the fabric of reality. If we can ascribe a primary or proto-purpose to the processes of evolution, this may provide a clue as to why almost all visiting aliens are humanoid. Some aliens might be cooking up biosynthetic humanoids to do work on Earth, and others may be the result of an innate intergalactic evolutionary trend where humanoid intelligence arises again and again on suitable planets. Perhaps all humanoids are members of some cosmic taxonomic club. Other morphologies may exist out there. We just haven't met them yet. Maybe intelligent octopods or arachnids have evolved on other planets, but these creatures aren't very interested in humanoid life on planet Earth. We just don't know. But the fact that intelligent humanoid aliens do exist could provide us with deep clues about the nature of life and evolution. These clues could serve as beacons that illuminate potential pathways to how we might surmount the current bottlenecks that threaten our civilization as a species. At the very least, knowing that some intelligent societies do survive long enough to become interstellar travelers could give us hope for our own future. If they can do it, maybe we can too. So we have seen, by our current understanding of reality today, the means by which an advanced alien civilization might traverse the depths of space and transmit information to anywhere and anywhen in the universe, not with their bodies, but with their machines. Futurist and science fiction author John Michael Godier calls it a hybrid integrated biological machine hive mind civilization. And while the mechanics remain largely unknown, at least to us, the theory is there. It works. So before genetic engineering and microtransistors and artificial intelligence, we had a very different view of what alien technology should look like. In another 80 years, our understanding of reality should again inform how we view alien intelligence. And even then, we probably will not have the whole picture. But as our own technology evolves, we should find the phenomenon of alien visitation becoming more likely, not less so. And if we survive the current bottlenecks that threaten us, humans will eventually learn that intelligent life not only exists, but has been observing our civilization for millennia. So in the end, aliens are a confrontation with ourselves. Seeing ourselves from an all-seeing alien eye will be a giant mirror held up to human society. What will we see? Is our house in order? Did we leave food out, trash on the floor, the bed unmade, bottles of alcohol hidden under the sofa, hardcore pornography on the television, racist propaganda on the living room table, a partially constructed bomb in the bedroom, and animals being sacrificed in the backyard? Looking into the eyes of alien intelligence, we are forced to see ourselves. Prehistoric biology living in a medieval system with futuristic technologies. If we can't bridge these gaps, we're not going to make it. If we don't stand up, we're looking at a brave new world in 5 years. If we want to survive and thrive, I think we need to start paying attention to negentropic life-enhancing processes I think that's how advanced visiting aliens survive over the long time scales they do. So to wrap this up, aliens exist. Aliens are here. They are already influencing our society. It could be that aliens aren't so interested in modern humans, but they are very interested in future humans, what we will become. A lot more people are aware of the alien reality now, thanks to the internet, thanks to the dogged research and activism by dozens of old school UFO researchers. We have earned this place in history where we can finally begin to recognize that our reality, that is conscious, intelligent reality, does not begin and end with the blue sky above us or the deep blue sea below. That alone, that recognition of reality, is all we need to change our minds and our destiny. Aliens can help us to answer some of the deepest questions that have dogged humanity since we learned to look up at the night sky and wonder where we are, who we are, why we are here, and what do we do with this immaculate gift of life and consciousness and intelligence enough to ask the questions. Thank you.
Raw freaking Vo. That is so awesome.
Really
Man,
good job.
I enjoyed that as much the second time around as I did the first time around. That's so awesome.
Thanks, man.
Okay, so now I think we should do some questions. We got 2 interviews worth of questions. Katie, did you want to hit us off with the first question?
Yeah, excellent presentation. Thank you so much for that. I'm trying to stay optimistic here because the state of the world, it seems like so many of us have this sense that a big shift is coming or something big's going to happen. And, the question that you proposed about ET interaction and will they come down and help us in any way, lend a helping hand. Do you think that if that were to ever happen, that ETs would take sides with our countries, with our borders? Have you thought about that?
Which is exactly why they shouldn't let it happen. And I think when we look back, we're going to be thankful that they left us alone to figure this out,
Right.
It's an extremely complex system. Perturbing it can have unexpected and unintended effects. I think we're dealing with those effects now. I think there's more than just this ceiling of suppression. I think there's a ceiling of suppression going on. Physics is basically static for the last 50 years. That's a problem. I guess I didn't get into it. I didn't have time, but it's very simple. When money flows into academia, then money controls what academia can and cannot be paid to look at, and everybody has to make a living, right? So it's really simple. The control mechanisms that are set up in our society are fairly straightforward. So yeah, I think that we're being left alone to figure this stuff out. But it appears that we've been given some sort of guiding star, which is the existence and the fact that we're sort of forced to figure it out for ourselves, to raise the questions, to be honest enough to ask the stupid questions, right? It is what we're supposed to be doing. What we're doing right now is exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, fully agree with you. Michael.
I want to know what your research process is like. How do you find sources and I ask that because as far as I know, you don't have any formal training in research methods or whatever. You didn't go to grad school for 10 years or anything.
Yeah.
But I'm genuinely impressed at the breadth of sources that you cross and I wonder or how do you how do you do it? Do you have an access to a library that you're going to because you're pulling from authors that are normally you'd only find in a library, search catalog or something?
Yeah, I do have a quite extensive book collection. I'm a book reader. And I think that that's how you for me, it's something interesting, and then you'll look at the reference, and then that'll lead you to another book, and you just kind of follow your nose. And there's a lot of great papers that you can find online. There's a lot of access that's sort of being denied, that's behind a paywall right now. That's another problem with our scientific sort of system, so I mean, I don't mean to come down too hard on people working within academia and science. Everybody's got to make a living. And we are limited in terms of sort of what we're allowed to look at, and we're limited in what we're allowed to discuss amongst each other.
It's not the people in academia who are like controlling that. Like, we're all pissed off about it too. It's the people in the publishing world that are like making crazy amounts of money off of subscriptions to journals. I mean, a subscription to a single journal can be hundreds of dollars.
Oh my God.
Greed.
I mentioned Robert Maxwell in the part one, and that was exactly what he did. He figured out a way to create so many more journals than there used to be, a handful of journals, but he started flooding the world with these journals. And then the libraries of the different universities couldn't say they had a complete collection unless they subscribed to them all. Right. So it just became a scam, is basically what it is. And then peer review became corrupted. So we're looking at a corrupt system. I feel funny, like trying to shine a light on this stuff, we better just to shut up about it, but it's really not,
No,
So
it's a huge problem. Like, if you want to just research and know what scientists are saying and working on, most of those scientists are like, I want everybody to know. I would love for my papers to be free for everybody. I mean, you don't get paid as a scientist for publishing a paper. There's no zero income from that. And even for writing books, which most scientists, book writing isn't really their thing. But yeah, there's no incentive for scientists or academics to keep their stuff behind paywalls.
Right.
But if you're just a normal person out in the world who isn't employed at a university or isn't a student in a university, you would have to spend $20,000 a year or something.
It's insane. It's really insane. And then what is accessible has been curated by the people who are paying for the research to be done, so you can go, you want to be broke and homeless, you can go look at the world's most interesting physical problems.
It's the thing I find interesting is that not only in your presentation, but we're seeing this theme come up more and more, that consciousness is actually being woken to not being selfish. Selfishness is what sin is. It's thinking about yourself all the time. Corporate greed is selfishness. It's the guy wanting to make money. So everything is selfish, is what keeps us not conscious. And I think what allows us to raise our consciousness is when you look at, people that meditate, or they change their lifestyle, they change the frequency, they meditate more, and it actually changes their lives physically. But what we're contending with now, I think, even with this subject, Thomas, is the consciousness of the general population. Because us four, we could just sit down and get right into, cattle mutilation or aliens, because we're so used to it. It's like we go right into the deep. But with most people, just mentioning that there's stuff in the sky scares the shit out of them. They won't even get into the abduction part or anything like that, right? So
that is the biggest sort of challenge that we're dealing with now, and it's building the bridge for people who have no interest or awareness in this, building that bridge about what is consequential about the subject to our future, and getting people to think about the future in any capacity is difficult.
Well, yeah, and especially when it comes down to fearing. Fear allows us to innovate. Without fear, we wouldn't be innovators. Like, if you're an apex predator, you would never evolve to the point of, like, the movie The Predator. I love The Predator, but an apex predator would not get to that technological. It would have no purpose to do so. But if you're a middle-of-the-run animal, like our ancestors used to be, you would have to be innovative, because you would have apex predators singling you out. You had no choice but to innovate. But I like your concept of, and I mention it all the time to Katie and Michael, but teamwork to make the dream work. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe galactic consciousness, whatever it is exactly focus on that, that it is teamwork. There is some retaliation. There probably are some bad eggs, but overall, and you got to think each galaxy must have its own consciousness awakening. So
Right.
galactically or universally, you have all these pockets of consciousness rising. And it just,
I think it becomes about management because you're dealing with a civilization like ours who is very close to having the technological capability to sort of play in that swimming pool, right? But without the conscious awareness of how to use the technology responsibly.
right.
And that is also being suppressed by the people who are controlling our technology, our science, our education. These are real issues, unfortunately. Yeah, it's not that we are innovators. We're amazing innovators, and we have. I've done a little bit of research into folks who have come up with a combustion engine that gets 200 to 300 miles to the gallon.
Wow.
Like people are out there creating stuff. There's Stanley Meyer and his water engine, but they die and then that technology just disappears. So we have, I think, the ability to raise our consciousness and to rise up along the technological ladder that will lead to the kind of conscious awakening, call it, that will allow us to interact with advanced civilizations. And this has to be the beginning of it, raising awareness that we are not alone here on our own planet. It's mind-boggling. But the biggest question is, what's in it for me? Why should this matter to me?
Yeah.
And if we
Yeah.
can find ways to start talking about this in ways that do matter, we're on the road.
Perfect.
Getting on the road.
I think you're dead on that one. We need to, it's related to your presentation about the robbers. If you rat them out, then you get off, or if vice versa. And that's sort of the way it is with the world now, right? With us working with other countries, it's like, okay, let's both not rat each other out and work together. And I think
but we're still not there yet. I mean, this was the prisoner's dilemma was invented in 1950. They figured it out in the 1980s. They actually did implement the lessons that Axelrod had shared with the community. And when we started to disarm, we actually used game theory for about 4 years.
long commitment. Yeah. Long commitment.
And then it all went to hell. And now we're kind of, nobody even talks about game theory anymore, or the strategies of dealing with nuclear armed countries and stuff like that. So we have to, I think, one of the things we need to do is start using the knowledge that we've already accumulated and putting it into practice.
Awesome. And Katie, do you have a final question for our guest today?
Well, just kind of a comment. I see like every decade we're seeing, like back in the 70s, it was really cool to flaunt your money and your riches and your fancy car. And now
Right.
in the generation is sort of frowned upon. So I just want to say, like, I agree with so much of what you're saying. And I feel like it's this slow progress and something big's got to give for this, this way of being more love and forgiveness and working together, cooperation to take hold. And we're just going to have to be patient and hopeful and live it in our own lives every day. So
exactly. Yeah. Start implementing these things in our own life and spreading, trying to spread the bubble of cooperation,
Right.
Exactly. And, be the change you want to see in the world. And I think, you guys are good. All three of you are great examples of that. Be the change you want to see. Don't be like everybody else. And, the road less traveled sometimes comes with, people are going to throw shit at you. That's just the way it works. You're going to get thrown some rocks, but somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to lead the way. And then when you realize you turn behind you, there's a whole group of people Kind of like Forrest Gump, you know, when he goes for a run and at the end there's full of people. That's what it is. But
Yeah, you
having a
think of
good
the
heart.
bravery of the guys who sort of founded the field of ufology, right? The J. Allen Hyneks and the James E. McDonalds of the world, the people who are out there, you know, shouting into the wind with all kinds of resistance coming at them from all angles of society. Those cats were brave. And then you have to ask, geez, you know, why were they so committed to that? You know, they must have been onto something. Maybe they were.
Yeah, and
That's
at the
great.
worst time
Thank
too.
you to all those guys and gals, Stanton Friedman and all the rest of them. But you do, I was thinking when you were talking earlier, the researchers, the investigators, and then you have the entertainment side of ufology. And
Right.
those are great and they're important because it
Right.
opens up more people to be curious about it.
Right.
But the real workers, there's no money in it.
Yeah.
And it's just hard. Something's got to change where, you
Hmm.
know, level the playing field a little bit so we can get out there and share the real good information.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are doing good work.
Thank you.
Great work.
we
You're doing
try.
God's work.
Yeah,
people.
you do as well. And this is why this is awesome. This is why the podcast is awesome, because it's all about connecting people together. Even off the podcast, I try to connect people as much as I can. I know that's not the norm in this field. Sometimes some people don't want to do that, but for me, I'm like, no, it is my mentality of teamwork to make the dream work. And if everyone could do their part, we get so further along than trying to be the center, that I'm going to be the guy that controls everything. That just cannot happen in a species. But I mean, we're arrogantly ignorant. That's what we are. We're arrogantly ignorant. You
Not
know?
a zero-sum game. You know, this is not competition. Like,
Right.
No, and it can be. It can be. It's the
Collaborate.
one subject that it cannot be a one-man band, but unfortunately, some people try. But your book is coming out soon, Thomas. We'd love to have you back on when the book comes out. If you need 3 people to write a forward for you for the book, we're
Right.
more than up and willing to do that.
Dynamite.
But are you doing any presentations or anything further in the UAP field from here until your book gets published?
Yeah, continue to do a couple of things here and there. I think George Knapp wants to have me on his show. I'll do that sometime coming up in the next week or two.
That's like late night, isn't it, too? George Knapp, isn't he like
I love
midnight or something like that? Yeah.
Coast to coast.
Yeah. Make a
Yes,
pot of
yes.
coffee. You'll need it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm a night owl, so for me, it's perfect.
It's perfect. I'm surprised you haven't been abducted if you're a night owl. Usually they know that. They come and pick you up if you're not watching.
sleeping, right? That's what they'll get you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I absolutely
That's the
love
way.
your presentation. I hope that the listeners are enjoying this. I know we've gotten a lot of good feedback. People on YouTube are just, the shock and awe. They're like, holy crap. I'm like, yeah. And I had somebody once reach out when I mentioned you were coming on. They said, well, what makes him a UFO expert? And I said, what makes any of us a UFO expert?
Yeah,
There's no such thing as UFO experts. So
we don't have any experts here, so
No.
and hopefully that will start to change. Like I said, meanwhile, you've got people like us. So
Yeah.
so, and the tide is changing. It's happening. We're on the road. We're now on the road, and that's interesting. It's the early days. But look, the cream will rise. The truth has to eventually reveal itself. You just need to stay open.
Well said. With that, guys, Thomas Jane, thank you so much.